This podcast is recorded on the traditional and unceded territories of the Musqueam, Squamish, Tsleil-Waututh, and Coquitlam peoples.
British Columbia, I've seen your mountains high, seen your pretty rainbows and your blue crystal skies, watched your winding rivers as they flow around the bend. To me you're not a stranger, you'll always be a friend.
Coming to you from the West Coast, this is Politicos. Today is October 9th, 2025.
I'm Scott Lundeboom.
And I'm Ian Bushfield. Happy pre-Canadian Thanksgiving.
Yeah. Happy Thanksgiving to you too.
We got so much happening this week. There's continued BC Conservative controversies. We have a bevy of bills in the BC Legislature. Federal budget negotiations are ongoing, and the Liberals have tweaked some of their signature legislation. Let's get into all of it. Join the conversation about many more things that have happened at patreon.com/politicos. Starting once again with the BC Conservatives. They can't go a week without a bad news story. I was trying to think when...
It's a good news story for David Eby.
Yeah, I was trying to think of the last time John Rustad had, good news stories. And it wasn't even during the election. He had a lot of bad news stories coming up during the election, too.
He did take the caucus from 2 to, was it 40? What was the actual?
It's a lot less now.
Yeah, he did take it from 2 to just shy of winning government, but like you said, it has been dropping.
His best story comes with the asterisk, did not win though, kind of like Pierre Poilievre's. But this week's latest scandal and controversy is caucus is apparently still quite unhappy.
Wait, you mean the couple dozen votes per riding didn't assuage their concerns about the leadership?
No, and neither did expelling first Eleanor Sturko and then staffer Lindsay Shepherd. Now we had some raucous caucus meetings last week, and then this week we had another caucus meeting at a very interesting time, we'll discuss in a second, but where amidst the discussions, John Rustad forced everyone to turn over their phones, so their personal phones, so he could try to figure out who's been leaking shit about the party in the most secure, I feel good and confident about my job kind of move.
Yeah, that's the thing that really stands out to me on all of this is just all of these things are being done from a position of weakness, whether it's the phone searches, which it's kind of crazy on its own, the having to fight tooth and nail to prevent a vote from coming up in the caucus on it. It's all playing defense, and all the while he's just taking damage. There's no hope of turning this around. There've been leaders that have been in tough spots before, but I mean, all the ones that did manage to kind of turn it around had a lot more, raw political talent than Rustad has shown.
Christy Clark was the big example I came up with in our chat, and she was in government at the time, which also is
she's also a hell of a campaigner too.
So she was able to, be in government, tell and convince enough people that she could win, and then won, and that brought everyone on board.
Here though, he is just delaying the inevitable, and the longer this drags out, and the more, frankly, bizarre acts like having to search elected members' phones is just going to further diminish him in the party. At this point, John Rustad is not going to be premier, but there's a decent chance that the NDP are going to lose the next election, and if he doesn't burn every bridge with the rest of the caucus and the future leadership contenders, decent chance he'd be a cabinet minister in another 4 years or so.
The funniest thing to me about this specific story is he tried to trace down who was leaking info, but clearly failed because the whistleblower hunt got leaked. The fact that he was searching phones to find a leaker got leaked by someone. So,
yeah, and it was pretty much right away. I remember seeing people tweeting about that pretty much as the caucus thing was happening.
John Rustad, please stop inviting Vaughn Palmer and Rob Shaw to your caucus meetings. That's the first tip. It's, or maybe Jazz Joe Hall's in the room. I don't know, but it's wild how just every single thing that comes through this party gets exposed. And so naturally, he spent most of the first week of the legislature on the defensive, despite being the opposition leader who should be holding the government to account for, like, what have you been doing for months and months and months? You passed this, like, urgent bill about pushing through big projects. Where are big projects? Didn't ask any of those questions. Instead is in the media being like, trying to defend his leadership race and saying things like, we have people in our caucus who don't believe in our democracy. To which he had to clarify that he meant, like, they don't believe in the internal processes set up within the Conservative Party, and that the leadership process and that caucus should overrule the leader members. But, like, as soon as you say my caucus doesn't believe in democracy, you're digging up.
Well, no, you're not. You're digging down at that point.
Yeah,
You should be digging up. Yeah, that's a hell of a quote. And, I'm sure someone in the NDP opposition research team has that one saved away to be pulled out next election for sure.
And, like, full credit to the CBC journalist Walker on this, the CBC host, because he pushes back properly. He goes, if you have caucus members that do not believe in democracy, would you like to share their names with us? How can you lead a caucus at a party if you think some of those caucus members do not believe in democracy, and what are they doing in your caucus? And he's like, I shouldn't have said that. Well, that's what you said. I know, but I didn't mean that. It's
a bad interview.
Yeah.
Yeah. Anyway, I know it's a hard thing to do, but, like, Rustad really should be trying to set things up at this point to ensure the party's going to be successful in this election, because it's not going to be him if he keeps dragging this out longer. And yeah, all this is doing is just weakening the Conservatives' position and giving them less time to prepare and going to be less effective come the next election. So at this point, like, why not resign? Like, what is the point of being a leader if your days are going to be taken up from now until the time you leave the post just doing annoying, caucus management stuff that doesn't substantively advance anything you want to be in politics to advance?
And they're kind of trapped on both sides between the NDP and 1BC. This past week kind of showed the NDP started off this week with Burnaby MLA Rohina Arora introducing a motion condemning ARPA, the Christian nationalist group that was invited by Heather Maws, a Conservative MLA, to the legislature's Hall of Honors in the spring, which got a bunch of headlines. And so they debate that. A couple Conservatives try to argue, like, this is a distraction, which it's the NDP. They're going to try and set a trap. And, it used up a bunch of time for a motion that doesn't do anything, but it let people grandstand. And ultimately, you get the NDP, the Greens, and Eleanor Sturko voting for this motion to condemn ARPA. 1BC's 2 MLAs and Jordan Keeley vote against it. And the Conservatives just went to have their caucus meeting where they got their phone spied on, trying to be like, we're above this. And it still went bad for them in every way. The next day, 1BC's Tara Armstrong invites a guy called Billboard Chris to the Hall of Honors, who's this, like, prominent transphobe asshole who goes around harassing people, allegedly. And he gets relegated to a secondary room, and 1BC introduces at first reading a bill to, like, ban gender affirming care for minors and block puberty blockers and more. And the NDP, Greens, and Eleanor Sturko again line up and vote this down at first reading. It's like the second bill that's been defeated at first reading in several years. The last one was also a transphobic bill that I think was introduced by a Conservative in this January, I want to say, or February, earlier this year or last year. But the Conservatives voted for that bill to move forward along with One BC, but there wasn't enough of them. So they're still like falling into this, social conservative culture war stuff when like they could be asking, hey, David Eby, what about pipelines? Alberta wants to build a pipeline. You said you're for moving jobs forward. Alberta's coming forward with some work on that. Why are you stymieing BC's development? And it would play great to their base. And maybe it would even split the NDP. But instead, it's just like internal shit and culture war stuff.
Yeah, and also really highlighting why the promise that Rustad made of free votes and everything is going to come back to bite them.
I don't think I've seen a vote that they've done where they split. On the ARPA motion, a couple of their MLAs were notably absent, including Warbus, and I forget who else. So it wasn't unanimous there, but they didn't come and vote with the government on that one, notably. One BC is obviously cranked like to the next level. Apparently Tara Armstrong is using question period to ask about like, does the province have a plan to tackle Antifa? So at least John Rustad's party is not the like wackiest in the legislature at this point, but that's not a good bar to aim for if you want to pretend to be a real party that should form government one day. So, despite all of that, the NDP had a busy week. They dropped, 13 bills in the last 5 days of sitting, which is probably most of what they want to drop this, fall. I saw one press release where they said they're going to drop most of them right away, so you can all take your time, read them, and we can all get our heads around it and be transparent and debate it.
I think there's one or two more coming. At least one on the Northern Transmission Project. That's apparently going to be coming in another week or two.
Yeah. So we got a bill on strengthening the Intimate Image Protection Act. This will increase the maximum monetary damage you can get if you've been the victim of someone sharing revenge porn, for example, from $5,000 to $75,000, which is quite a big increase in damages.
I mean, 5,000 seemed a little small.
It still goes through the Civil Resolution Tribunal, and those are appealable or at least judicially reviewable by the courts if someone disagrees with the results there. But yeah. On a similar vein, they're also strengthening sexual violence measures by requiring post-secondary schools to develop sexual violence plans, which, seems good. No issue with that. They're going to allow school boards to legally open childcare, which I didn't realize was a barrier. So that's great. I hope it comes with actual funding for schools to open childcare, because that was the thing in my district. Like, apparently my kid's elementary school was supposed to be a pilot project for before and after school care, but the money evaporated for that. So,
I mean, given where things are in the budget, I would not hold your breath on that one.
Yeah. So, nice bill. Not sure it's going to change anything. Another nice bill is the Prompt Payment for Construction Industry Act. It's not called that. It's something like that. But basically, if you are in small and medium-sized contractor, you can expect clear timelines for getting paid, adjudication processes, and just basically, when you do work, you will get paid faster for it because it will be the law.
Yeah, I mean, this is great. I'm hoping it also applies to suppliers of the contractors too. One point I was working for a broadcaster, and like there was like one person whose primary job was basically calling up all the contractors that were late on their bills, and like that is just a hugely inefficient way to do things. And I'm sure it'll help if the contractors are getting paid quicker, but you sure want to make sure the whole supply chain is covered on that one.
That's fair. It does sound like they've also learned from other provinces like Ontario and Alberta that already have prompt payment laws, so that's positive. There's a phase-in process for this to, make sure businesses can come up to date with that. So positive stuff. We have our first miscellaneous type bill, the Attorney General Statutes Amendment Act, that kind of touches two bills, the Public Guardian Trust Act and the Insurance Vehicle Act. Not going to pretend I understand what these changes are. The ICBC changes are changing something from like a fee to a retroactive tax, but then they're also claiming they're not collecting any new revenue off it. So I think they're just moving something on the balance sheets or the income statements. The next two, Bills 22 and 23, are really interesting. This is the Statutes Act and Regulations Act. They're going to make online versions of the BC laws official, because apparently if you are entering evidence in court, you have to get a printed copy from the King's printer for it to be considered official. Otherwise, it's not taken as the real law, which
is what?
Right? Like, it means you don't know what the law is.
Yeah. Does it also have to be, sent to the courts by like a messenger on horseback to be official? Like, are smoke signals a legally acceptable method of transmission? It's actually wild that it's 2025 and the official the government's own website detailing what is in the regulations by posting them in text format is not considered official.
It's not the word of law when it's a law on the website yet, but after this it could be. Conveniently, they'll also have a nice website provided for by regulations that will allow them to have maps, forms, images, everything mentioned in regulations, orders, and council. So all the official versions will be online and easy to access. This seems great. Nice modernization, long overdue. Again, it's 2025. So, Bill 24 is a Vaping Damage Act. This is the BC government wants to give itself the ability to sue bad companies, in this time, the vaping companies. This is like the third of these bills they've introduced. They did their tobacco lawsuit in the 90s. We're finally getting paid out for that. They have their opioid lawsuit, and now we have our vaping damages lawsuit bill, which, all right, fine. Next is housing amendment stuff coming forward. I meant to put this here.
Yeah, so this one's basically them amending the Local Government Act and Vancouver Charter to basically try and close up some of the loopholes that cities have used to basically do an end run around the Housing Supply Act and transit-oriented development requirements on there. So this is going to let them basically, instead the regulations that the province is putting in place and what the cities can do around stuff like parking requirements, the buildable areas allowed under the zoning for those, and various other things that basically have let municipalities put poison pills into their bylaws that would have made them technically compliant with the provincial legislation, but make it completely unfeasible to actually build anything. It's like good. I mean, California basically had to do the same sort of thing when it passed some of its state-level housing laws. It took years for like their ADU legislation to actually result in any ADUs being built, because they had to go back and amend the thing like 3 or 4 times to cut out all of these things that cities were using to basically technically permit ADUs but ensure none ever get built. So like good on them for that, but also it's kind of following that same thing of, yeah, we'll require that municipalities put these things into the regulations, and we'll monitor this and see if it's going to be effective or not. So the whole thing's going to get dragged out over additional months to years, and they really just should have at the start taken the approach of, we're just going to write this into provincial law that this is what you can and can't do, and any city bylaw that contradicts that's just null and void. But since they took this approach, they're sticking with it for this bit.
Yeah, it's the whack-a-mole game they get to play. I guess their optimistic view could be, hey, we gave municipalities flexibility. We're so excited. Many have taken us up on it and are doing well, because not every municipality is poison pilling it, for example. But
I mean,
BC
even the
is
ones
such
that
a
are doing
messy
well,
creature, right? That there are so many municipalities just in Metrovan that
yeah, and
it
I'm
makes
not
it
even
hard.
all that willing to cut the ones that are doing well some slack, because they could have done those changes themselves without waiting for the provincial government to tell them to.
This bill also includes a bunch of changes to the Short-Term Rental Accommodation Act, the Airbnb restrictions, closing a bunch of loopholes, it seems like, and requiring a little bit more enforcement tools and clearing up some definitions. So again, kind of just, we've done a bunch of the laws, now we need to whack-a-mole and fix the issues that have come up since. Next, we have an amendment to the Vancouver Charter that will allow the City of Vancouver to hold a referendum on the Parks Board in the future. I'll talk about that on Canby Report. A lot to say about that, but well, what's your hot take on it? Because you won't be on Canby.
I mean, my hot take is that this lets the provincial government not have to really make a decision on this one, and we've seen that happen once or twice before, where provincial governments don't really want to do what some cities are asking them for. So just create a referendum. Let the city politicians have to go to bat for it and convince the voters of it, and the government can wash their hands on that one.
They did also add in a requirement in here that that if the park board gets absorbed into the city, to sell off park board land of permanent parks, which is a specific definition, it will require a unanimous vote of council, which forecloses any chance that might have existed that the city of Vancouver or Ken Sims' vision was, let's shutter the park board and then we can sell off land to make a bunch of money.
Yeah, that's I've heard that line of argument for years when it comes to why an elected park board's important, but I just don't buy it. For one, Vancouver's like the only city in Canada. I think there's like one small town somewhere that also might have an elected park board.
Cultus Lake.
That's the one, yeah. It's like one of two in the entire country that has an elected park board. And it's not like every other city out there is devoid of parks because they sold them all off to be condos years ago. And like the real check on this one isn't going to be in, who the park board reports to directly. It's the fact that if you even suggest it, you have tanked your political career and are lucky if you don't get run out of town by an angry mob of Vancouverites.
So we'll see.
Yeah, there's already a political Democrat check on this. Like, you don't need to boost the threshold on it, but I see why the province did it to, just address that concern.
Yeah, it's not the only change to the Vancouver Charter. They are also amending the Vancouver Charter and Community Charter through Miscellaneous Statutes Amendment Act number 2, 2025, specifically to require municipalities, or at least empower municipalities, to have in-camera or closed meetings for First Nations negotiations. That's not currently allowed, but there are certain times when local First Nations want to share confidential information with a city council that they share territory with, and they can't do that. Official bylaw changes have to be done in open meetings, but there's already a lot of confidential negotiations that can happen in closed meetings, like, for example, deciding to book the Harry Potter experience in Stanley Park was done in a park board closed meeting. And it came to bit them in the ass for that. But this seems like a reasonable reason to close a meeting.
Yeah, it is going to be interesting to see how much this one becomes another data point on the argument that's being put forward. And you hear more and more about how the NDP is taking a approach that emphasizes secrecy when it comes to reconciliation matters.
Yeah, apparently this comes at a request from UBCM. So, I mean, they don't listen to most of the things that come out of UBCM, but in this case, I think like there just reasonably are negotiations. And municipalities are such a weird creature that they don't have like a cabinet that can meet and discuss these things before bringing it to like a change to the legislature. So I see the purpose of it. I can see why people would get nervous around it. Closed meetings should not be the default ever. It's just antithetical to democracy, but I can see the purpose of it. They're also going to amend the School Act to require ministerial approval before the use of expropriation powers by school boards, which is something that they say is the existing practice, but now will be in law. I don't think school boards are regularly expropriating properties for educational purposes. It says it's only been a handful of times, but now it'll be.
Yeah, I mean, well, also, school boards pretty much don't have their own sufficient capital spending that they can just go out and purchase a bunch of land for future schools. They almost always have to wait on the province to kick in some funding for new schools. Mm-hmm. So you're already at the point where, like, by default, you're going to be looping the provincial government in on that, getting the cabinet sign off.
Next is some consumer protection modernizations. Basically, you're going to be able to get your credit report for free. You can set up alerts for it. There'll be new rules for credit reporting agencies and some extra protections against identity and credit card fraud. I don't know enough about this law to know if this is how good these improvements are. They sound great. But
I thought you were ready, like, to get one credit report a year from each of the agencies for free.
This is going to allow you to go up to monthly.
Ah, okay.
You can access it once a month, and you can get a, alert if you have a credit issue, which seems good. It'll help you know if you get defrauded, right?
Yeah, I mean, it seems like the most important thing here is the faster correction for credit report errors. Like, that's sometimes disputing those, I understand, can be a real pain.
And finally, the last bill of the week, Bill 29, is an update to the Child, Family, and Community Service Act. This will require this will allow for voluntary safety plan agreements for parents and to make around the care of child. I believe this is something that's been recommended. I know there's been a lot of issues in the protection of children, especially those in care, but I'm not going to pretend to be knowledgeable enough about this law to say how great this is, but it seems positive to allow for safety plans. Fine. So, 13 odd bills here, which all address, I think, like reasonable concerns or modernizations, but none kind of rise to the like, hey, we're facing some like big economic issues. How are we going to deal with that? That's not answered by this week of regulations to me.
No, we're going to have to see what comes from when the cabinet starts exercising their like Bill 14 and 15 powers on that, I think. And I guess wait for the budget. Although, the last budget was during the period where the economic emergency was also front of mind. You basically saw very little in that, so I'm not super confident we're going to see more in the next one.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, I mean, the thing you kind of see from across the country and all levels of government is the sense of urgency and seriousness that existed in February through April, maybe May, has pretty much evaporated, and things have kind of gone back to business as usual.
It's the most Canadian approach to things, right? It's how fast can we make issues go away so we just don't have to talk about them again.
Not only that, it's also how bad can things really get? it's the if there's like one pretty consistent thing in Canadian politics, it's an unwillingness to like really think through and seriously grapple with, the tail risk scenarios or worst case scenarios for pretty much anything. Because the country's like had like 6-7 decades of pretty much uninterrupted peace and prosperity. Like that muscle memory is gone, and it's apparently harder to get back than we might have thought 6 months ago.
Yeah, and we don't even have it in the show notes where we'd cut it, but like Trump's meetings with Mark Carney this past week were kind of like, they weren't a flop. They sold them as, like nothing came of them, but they were like, this was productive. And, we had a lot of positive discussions, and Trump said some nice things about Mark Carney, which is rare. I guess because he's not Justin Trudeau. But
I mean, that is one of the main things Mark Carney's had going for him ever since he entered politics.
Carney pulled out his Trump is a transformative president hit because I guess he couldn't find a synonym that also can similarly be positive or negative depending how you want to look at it. And it's like, okay, that's great. They are still making 20 or 51st state jokes. We still have tariffs on us. Like, we've dropped some of ours. Like, what is happening?
I think part of it's just going to be real hard to get the administration to reverse course on that stuff. So like the best bet may be to just, keep things frozen where they are to the best of their ability while using the time efficaciously to strengthen Canada's hand on it. But
we also had like the RCAF, the Air Force admiral or top general, musing about we're on track to join the Golden Dome, which is like not what Carney's base wants to hear. I don't think that has very high support in Canada.
Yeah, I get the feeling the CF still sees this as a temporary disruption, or a temporary rough spot on what has otherwise been a multi-generational defense cooperation, and they're probably not all that keen on changing that up. So it might be one of those areas where you need more political leadership than expecting the defense brass to do it on their own. But yeah, sure. Like there's
I think that's reasonable, right? You don't want the military arbitrarily changing policy. And Carney's official line, even in the election, was like, we need a new economic and security agreement with the U.S. And people kind of overlooked that in favor of the arms up stuff. And he talked about it after, and now it's kind of just like unclear what we're pursuing.
Not even sure if it was he's never really so much as a new relationship is what I think what he said.
Yeah, he never really said we would break it, I guess. People kind of read that in.
And like, a huge part of the problem is just geography being what it is. It's very hard to disentangle from the U.S. either economically or militarily. Geographic proximity is just such a huge factor when it comes to which countries trade with other countries. That even as cheap as international maritime shipping's gotten, it's hard to make that more lucrative and competitive than 34 or 320 million people just across a short drive away.
Coming back to British Columbia, one of the ways we could fund the prosperity we need is elections penalties. I like that for a segue back. Doesn't work because the election penalties that were announced this past week totaled just over $1,000 across 4 people. 3 BC Conservative candidates, Larry Neufeld, who won and became an MLA, were fined, and the other 2 were just candidates, were fined about $150 to $250 each for sponsoring election advertisements without an authorization statement. This is like a video online didn't say paid for by the financial agent or approved by the financial agent of the BC Conservative Party or whatever. That's Larry Neufeld, Zishen Walla from Surrey City Centre, and Gwen O'Mahony. And
every election, there's always a few of these ones where someone just misses it when they're drafting the ads, and it's pretty typical for the penalties to range in that amount. Like, don't do it again, but like this isn't a particularly serious infraction.
Yeah, and it's kind of more of a sign like the Conservatives are a younger party that don't have all the processes that like the NDP has done multiple elections and also wrote these rules. So they found it easier to follow them. But I think the most interesting of the 4 fines was the one third-party advertising sponsor who was charged $600 for failing to register before sponsoring election advertising. That was Chip Wilson for his giant NDP communist sign on his yard.
Yeah, I mean, so like, Chip's hardly a particularly sympathetic figure in all of this. The rhetoric on the sign was a little over the top, but I don't know, I'm kind of a little uncomfortable with the idea that it should be a finable offense to express your own political views on your property with a sign that you put up or you printed off somewhere and got put up. Like, I totally get it if, it was a billboard or even like on a commercial property that he owned. Fair enough. But like, it was his house. Like, I think you should be able to put up something on your house, even if you did have a print shop print off the sign. Because like, that's apparently the thing that caught him up on this was homemade signs are entirely exempt from this. But it has to be like truly homemade. You can't have any.
You got to get the crayons out.
Exactly. So like, if it is like a plywood board with spray paint on it, it's fine. If you go down to a Staples to print off something you whipped up on your computer, it's technically election advertising, and you'll get fined if you don't register ahead of time. And like, that seems kind of like a bullshit distinction on that. Like, there obviously needs to be a limit somewhere, but like, it doesn't seem like this is where the limit really ought to be. And I don't think anyone's going to bother contesting a $600 fine on this, but like, it feels like the sort of thing that if litigated, that there could be a charter issue on.
Yeah, I don't know how a court would come down on it. I agree with you. There's a free speech question here, and free speech rights are engaged. But like, ultimately, what got him was both the amount he spent on it and the fact he could have just pre-registered. Like, that I'm going to be putting my voice out there. I'm going to be spending my money to express my opinion, which is what the rules are trying to capture. Like, that you are putting money into a campaign on the election is what we're trying to get, is dark money. And it's not banned, right? He was allowed to put up a sign. He just didn't sign the right form beforehand. And like, I don't know if the rule was just here. I find it funny. I know that this is less than pennies for him, right? He probably has dinners that cost more than this. So it is very funny that we have this system that has never really issued a substantive fine. I don't think he deserves a, extensive fine for this if he gets fined at all. But even when we see egregious violations, the fines are like $500, $1,000. So, although I guess in some cases they can ban candidates from running in a future election. They've definitely done that for local elections. But it's an interesting case, regardless. Let's jump to federal politics again and come back to it in full as we round off this episode. Some discussion on the budget that's coming up next month. François-Philippe Champagne, the finance minister, is now floating the idea that fall budgets are just better. You know what, Scott? Everyone just wants a fall budget. Spring budgets are passé. We're going to do fall budgets going forward. So it's not that we've actually delayed it. It's that this is what's going to be normal going forward.
I mean, fine. I don't love that it's taking so long to actually get a budget in place. Like, it's still late, even if you decide that retroactively it was always going to be a fall budget. But yeah, I honestly don't think it really matters when you decide to do this. It just be fairly consistent going forward. And it does seem like at least recently, federally, we've had more disrupted spring and winter sessions than fall ones. Like, maybe there's a slight argument there, but honestly, I don't care that much when they do it. I just want them to regularly do the budget.
Yeah. Like, the federal government's fiscal year goes April 1st to March 31st. So I guess, like, a fall budget kind of does make more sense, because then it's like, all right, starting April 1st, this is how the money will go. And you're not just, like, introducing it in March or April, and the budget is being passed as the fiscal year turns over. So, like, I know it doesn't really affect it that much. They're just, because we don't live in a shutdown country.
Yeah,
but
if anything, it just gives them. Yeah, if anything, it just gives them a little more runway to take the stuff that's in the budget and actually have it implemented for the start of the fiscal.
Yeah, so fine, whatever. I think the more interesting question is, how do they get the votes they need for the budget? We talked last week about the blocs kind of ruling out automatically supporting this. Some sources are still saying that the bloc might support it. The NDP is saying they've had talks with Carney, but they haven't, like, laid out hard lines for him, just like they don't want to support an austerity budget. Their messaging, Don Davies' messaging, has been awful.
Oh, yeah, he basically came out and said, yeah, we don't have anything we're asking for in this budget, and, you know, it's up to them to present us something we like, which, like, how are they to know if you don't tell them what you want to see in the budget?
Quote, we didn't make any specific requests. We're not bargaining either in public or privately. We are doing, as New Democrats, is laying out our vision of what's required for our country going forward.
Are they, though?
I don't know what that vision is. I don't know.
Well, it turns out we might have gotten a slight view of what that vision is, because turns out there has been some closed door talks, and the NDP's vision is more money for the NDP. So, you know, in it for the party benefits more than anything.
The best part of this story is you can go in Slack and see where I said they should make a red line party funding for caucus, at least, if nothing else. And then the next day, this story comes out that they are seeking caucus funding.
I mean, I don't think it's actually all that great an ask, or at least not an ask in isolation from everything else, because it's real easy to read this as they only care about themselves and they're not actually looking out for Canadians in this one.
Don Davies isn't going to be leader in 6 months. Doesn't fucking matter. The party
it kind of does
exist.
Because, well, yeah, if the party dies, that might be different. But you know, people still see what the NDP does to the extent they ever get any news coverage, and you know, those impressions are gonna stick with people.
So the fun thing is
broader impression.
So the fun thing is only one candidate is actually in caucus right now. The rest could just say, that was a ridiculous move. They could slam him for it. It would be a bit uncouth, but it would be strategically smart. The one who's in the awkward position is Heather McPherson, who will probably have to support Don Davies' moves here, but then also wants his job, but permanently.
Or she should just break with the caucus on this one and vote against it. Like, the interim leader is not going to discipline a leadership candidate for taking a vote that is in line with what I am sure the vast majority of NDP members actually think is the correct way to vote on a bill that they are almost certainly not going to like.
Although, like, the official story is that the NDP caucus funding talks are not related to the budget at all.
They're
just separate things.
Which is some bullshit.
Like, maybe they get the money before the budget, though. And then, I guess, they get to vote for free for or against the budget.
Yeah.
It'll be tainted.
That's stretching credulity quite a bit to pretend that's they're not related.
The other best thing here is, of course, the Bloc Québécois, who, upon hearing that the NDP wants money, says, no, we want money if they get money. Why? Because they're the Bloc Québécois. And specifically, they figure that if the NDP gets the money that it would have gotten as official party status, then the Bloc should get the money that it got in the last parliament when it had 32 MPs instead of 22. It's just like the peak Bloc move to be like, well, if someone else gets something, we deserve more.
I think, their argument really is, well, if the NDP is going to get money despite losing a bunch of seats, we should also get money despite losing a bunch of seats because, apparently losing a bunch of seats shouldn't count against you when you get assigned your party funding.
Nothing in here says the NDP is asking for as much or more money than they got in the last parliament, though. It sounds like they want money for 2 staff.
What I read basically says they want an amount that would have been what they would have got if they had official party status. So, roughly double what their current caucus would net them. So, like, on percentage terms, it's actually a bigger increase than the Bloc is asking for.
The other interesting NDP story this past week was the chief electoral officer of the party coming out against one of the alleged candidates, I guess, Yves Engler.
Against isn't, I wouldn't quite read it as against. It's more of a, hey, one of these candidates is saying something that about how the party's interacted with them that's not actually true. And there may be some not following the leadership race rules when it comes to fundraising. Going on.
The official statement from Eric Hubert Daly, it has recently come to my attention that Mr. Yves Engler has been sharing with the media that he has not yet been approved to stand as an official leadership candidate. I would like to clarify that we are not in receipt of an application from Mr. Engler, and as such, he has no current standing within the leadership contest. Engler put out his own statement saying they're following all the rules. They don't actually have to officially register until the end of January. They have spoken to Elections Canada, and they are making sure they are collecting donations legally within federal law. I don't know why they haven't applied.
Well, I think part of it is because he's not actually serious about running as a leadership candidate. He wants to get disqualified so he can grandstand about how corrupt and sell out the NDP really is. I mean, just looking at the Elections Canada registered leadership contestants, his name isn't in there. They've updated it since last week because Avi Lewis is now on there and he wasn't on last week. So it's not like Elections Canada takes forever to update their leadership current leadership contestants one. So like he's not bothered to register with Elections Canada. Like, yeah, he may technically not be in breach of any of the rules there, but he should be registered if he was serious about running. And even so, the party also puts its own rules in place for it. And one of those is that the fundraising has to go through the NDP's fundraising portal, which is pretty standard for leadership contestants. You can take issue with the fact that the party takes a cut of that, which is also very standard for leadership contests. But, if you want to run for the party, you do have to follow the rules to run for the party. And to date, his fundraising does not appear to have gone through that means. There's an e-transfer thing set up on his website, I believe.
Yeah. It's unclear to me that he's actually fully broken the rules, but he's clearly, like, the letter right? I think he's definitely against the spirit, but like, does he have to immediately hand over every dollar or 25 cents of every dollar? Maybe not, but like, he's not doing it in the cleanest way. And that's,
yeah, you can argue
like,
about the cut bit,
the-
but like I
the
think
best-
the portal bit, like the rules pretty explicitly say shall use the party's fundraising portal on that. Like I don't think there's a way to read around that in the we're maybe breaching the spirit, but we're compliant with the letter.
Yeah, their argument is there's no rule that says you can't campaign before becoming an official candidate. It's like, it's dodgy. Like,
I mean, his whole campaign has been.
I can't really defend him. I like see that he is generating interest, right? He's got thousands of signatures. He's got $85,000. He's saying, even if he only really has a fraction of that, it's still doing better than like Tony McQuail probably is doing, the farmer who wants to join with the Greens. And so he's getting some traction, which is interesting to me. But like, he could do something good, and instead he's either intentionally shooting himself in the foot, or he's just really bad at running for leader. And if he's really bad at running for leader, he's probably going to be really bad at being leader, even if you like his politics. So,
oh yeah, he would be a disaster if he actually got to be leader. But I'm at this point, I'm pretty convinced he doesn't actually want the job, considering he spends like 2/3 of his comms output attacking the NDP as a party.
he's a poster.
Oh yeah,
a hardcore poster.
He is a hardcore poster, and that alone should be worrying. Just I don't think hardcore posters do well as party leaders or prominent politicians.
We'll see if Aaron Gunn becomes leader of the BC Conservatives. Let's just close off with the two bills that are seeing some changes at the federal government level. First, we've talked about this citizenship by descent bill that has come about following some court rulings about the Lost Canadians. They have amended it in committee to add residency requirements that to get this citizenship by descent, at some point you have to actually live in Canada, and you should know English or French
And
to
this
a
has
reasonable degree.
security rating, which
Yes.
is like the most interesting one of that. I don't know. To me, it reads like they basically took the rules for going from PR to citizen and just copy pasted them in there. Because there'd been, I think the original version of the bill had that specific number of days you had to reside in Canada. It was the same as for PR, except there was not a window in which they had to take place. I believe it is basically
Right.
comes out to 3 of the last 5 years if you're doing PR to citizen, and that's what this accounts for here. But before that, it was just 3 years cumulative over your life for the version 1 of the bill. And yeah, tacking on like language requirements and a security screening, like really reads like they wanted to make this as if someone's doing the PR to citizenship change.
Yeah. I don't have the strongest feelings about this. It is a little bit interesting that, citizenship by descent now depends on where you were born. But I don't know. This came about because of court challenges, and I do wonder if introducing this increases the risk that someone challenges it in court in the future. I mean, it doesn't mean they'll win, but
I mean, potentially. They're still a little hung up on the security one. There's like, I get it if someone's, coming from like entirely outside the country, doing the full immigration thing, but like, you don't put that in place for people who have, who aren't becoming citizens, but, have a citizenship by descent or or birthright on there. So that one strikes me as a weird addition, and one that's like the one that should probably, of all of these, be the most likely to be cut off. Because, speak an official language, that one seems reasonable, and have, some connection to the country by actually having lived there for a period also seems reasonable. I mean, you can debate like the number of days and like what period over which it should accrue, but the basic premise of speak the language and have a connection to the country is a pretty reasonable one.
I'll be curious to see how the Senate treats this, because this seems like the kind of stuff the Senate is really there for in some ways, really thinking through. One of the amendments that didn't come through came from the Conservatives, who wanted to use this bill to end birthright citizenship for children of temporary residents. So the idea being someone comes to Canada, has a baby, that baby automatically gets citizenship. Their big boogeyman here is birth tourism allegations. The idea that people are flying into a Richmond hospital, having their baby so it gets Canadian citizenship, then flying back to wherever they're from.
Yeah. So presuming that's occurs in large enough numbers to be a concern, this seems like a weird one to do it, of like targeting temporary residents rather than people on short-term visas, which would be the one that would make the most sense. If you are flying into a Richmond hospital, giving birth, and then promptly leaving, you're probably not, on a student visa or a limited or term limited work visa of some kind, right? Like, you're almost certainly going to be on a tourism visa at that point. And like, that one really seems like it could be handled just by tightening up screenings on like a few countries, or residents of a few countries where that is the most prominent, and just not issuing visas that overlap with due dates.
Yeah, it seems like Rumpelgarner was mentioning both of these things at the same time, and mostly focusing on the birth tourism, but then not really talking about this temporary residence thing, other than like, there's a lot of temporary residents now. What if they're having a lot of kids? It's like, that's a lot of ifs. Like, if we want to have this debate, let's bring some facts to it, instead of just like, I saw some scary social media posts, which is what they're citing. And also there's like one lawyer in here who's like, I get a lot of calls from people who ask if they can have a baby to speed up immigration, and I try to dissuade them, which is also weird. I mean, sure. Regardless, the Liberals and Bloc worked together to vote down the Conservative motion or amendment. Bloc's a little interesting there. I could see them going either way on this kind of stuff.
Yeah, same.
The other bill, just looking at the time so we can wrap up, that's getting a big rewrite is Bill C2, the Safe Borders Act, and immigration changes that had been proposed as one of the first things Carney brought in. That bill is dead. Instead, it's Bill C12 now. A lot of the same things in there. Some of the more controversial elements have dropped. I literally just saw the press release of the bill like 5 minutes before we started recording, so I'm not going to pretend I have a like coherent understanding of how much better or worse this bill is.
Yeah, looking at the press release for that and C2 side by side, looks like mostly related to the more controversial provisions around some information sharing, the ability to search Canada Post mail, access or intercept of information communications, and like the some of the information law enforcement would be able to access directly. Bunch of the stuff like have the Coast Guard conduct security patrols, give CBSA the ability to do export inspections, tightening up some of the rules around asylum claimants. That stuff's all there.
Yeah. I know the Conservatives had started to express a lot of concerns about C2 doing what an opposition should do. And that, I think, is what brought that bill to an end, is like there was no dance partner for the Liberals to get it across. And it's kind of like the ideal situation of a minority government when, criticisms of the bill can actually result in changes to it. Are these changes enough? I mean, there's always going to be critics, but I'll be curious to look into some of the more detailed analysis, because some of this gets quite technical.
Yeah, so like the privacy concerns, I think will be largely ameliorated by this, but the asylum components that were somewhat controversial look like they're basically the same as C2, from what I can see here, at least according to the press release. So I will expect that will be a little more or there will definitely be some controversy. Like, would not surprise me if the NDP doesn't support this one over it, but I'm pretty sure you could get Bloc and Conservative votes for it.
Yeah. For example, and then we can cut off, is like the asylum claim here is if your asylum claim made more than 1 year after someone first arrived in Canada after June 24th, 2020 would not be referred to an immigration review board. This would apply to anyone, including students, temporary residents, regardless of whether they left their country and returned. So the idea is like you visited Canada on June 25th, 2020, then you went back, and then you came here more recently. You can't make an asylum claim. And I can imagine very quickly an example where like the situation in your country has changed between June 2020 and October 2025. That would mean, hey, you felt safe to go back then, but now is different, but now you can't claim asylum.
Yeah, so I think this is trying to basically deal with what we saw when the Liberal government basically changed some of the rules around what they were going to be granting with respect to student visas to some like the more dubious colleges and whatnot. And pretty much as soon as that happened, there was a big spike in asylum claimants from people on student visas prior, and like this is a way to address that, to basically be like, yeah, this is obviously kind of being done for convenience to try and extend a stay rather than bona fide asylum situation here. There's probably a little wiggle. Ideally there'd probably be some wiggle room for like when there's been a
civil war
significant change
in
one's home country, but like probably with a higher bar than exists now, or with like a high burden of proof to demonstrate that or something. But yeah, clogging up the system with a bunch of dubious claims is the sort of thing that has the effect of undermining trust in the immigration system, and you do want to do what you can to maintain that. So overall, probably good we're doing this, but there's maybe some room for a couple tweaks.
It's very interesting to see Carney's government back down on something signature, like not entirely, but at least admit like changes were necessary. And so I'll see how that plays in the budget when it comes in a few weeks, I guess. And that has been Politicos. Find links to everything we talked about at politicos.ca. Support the show and get access to our exclusive Slack channel at patreon.com/politicos. Our intro music is Beautiful British Columbia by Serge Plotnikov. Politicos is a production of Leg and Boot Media. Audio editing provided by Jesse Woodward at listener-supported CHLY 101.7 FM in Nanaimo. Learn more at chly.ca.